Hey everybody, welcome. My name's Tom and this is the first in a series of videos on building a website with Flask. Now, I just want to throw out a warning there that if you have really any experience building websites, then this is probably not the best tutorial for you because I'm going to start at the very minimal thing that you need to know in order to build a website. We're going to go through some very easy examples in Flask, and even in this video here, I'm just going to talk about how things are kind of put together and sent across the internet and things like that. So if you have experience, if you built some websites before, I'd recommend perhaps finding a tutorial that's going to move a little bit faster, because I'm going to go through this step by step, very slowly, explain every little thing that's working, how it works, all of that stuff. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. In this video, all I want to do is kind of explain how things work, and then I'm going to introduce Flask here. So this is just a basic setup of kind of how things are sent back and forth across the internet. It's super simple, but I just want to explain what we're doing and kind of why we need these different parts. Why do we need Flask anyways? So Flask is what they call a micro web framework. Really what that means is that it's going to sit over here. So this is a server here. This little guy represents a server, and this represents a database. So we've got this server and a database, and they're kind of talking to each other. And over here, we've got all these programming languages. And when I say server, you might be thinking a physical computer, which, yeah, it's going to be a physical computer. But it's also something that has been programmed up. So it's a program on this computer. The server itself is actually really the software that's running everything and serving pages and doing things like that. And by serving pages, I mean sending you the things that you're requesting. Could be files, could be HTML pages, could be streaming music, could be anything. So when we create a web server, we're going to pick a language, a programming language, in order to build that server with. Now, a lot of stuff is built these days in Node.js. A lot of stuff still built in PHP. In fact, a lot of the stuff out there is PHP, because WordPress is built in PHP, and tons of websites are built on top of WordPress. Java, Ruby on Rails, and then of course Python over here, which we'll be using. Okay, so these right here are going to be running on this server. Okay, so they're the software on there that turns this computer really into a server. And they probably have a database connected to them where they're going to send information back and forth to the database and save things. Okay, so what does a server actually do? Well, you're over here, you're playing around on the internet, and you type in a URL. So you type in, I don't know, you go to your favorite search engine or something like that. Okay, now what you want is you're going to request that the server gives you something. Now let's pretend you're going to some web page somewhere. So you type in the address and you want to go to a certain web page. So you send that URL out to the internet, it bounces around to a couple different routers, and eventually it ends up at the server. Now when it gets there, one of these languages, let's say Python in this case, there's a Python based server on here. It's going to get that request from you. Now, your request could just be something like google.com. And if it's google.com, that means it's going to return that basic search page to you. Okay, it could be anything else. It doesn't really matter. Now, when it gets that request, it's going to figure out what page you need. And what I mean by page, it means an HTML document and all the other files that go along with it. So we have an HTML page, which is, think of HTML as the framework for the page, or kind of the like if you're making a house, the HTML is what is the house itself. Okay. You also have the CSS, and that's kind of what we call the styling. It's going to add different styles to the page. You can change colors, things like that, and we'll get more into that in some other tutorials later. And then JavaScript is adding all the interactivity to the page. All right, so these three things together, they're going to be individual files, maybe mini files for JavaScript and mini files for CSS. And what happens is the server determines the page you're going to look at, and then it says, all right, I need to get this HTML, this JavaScript file, and maybe these two CSS files. And it's going to take those and it's going to send them to you. So you sitting over here, you typed in the request, and now the server is going to start sending you these files. Okay, so it sends it across and you end up getting it. So you're sitting here at your computer and you get this HTML file, the CSS, and the JavaScript file. Well, what do you do with it then? Well, that's where your browser comes in. Your browser takes all of those files and compiles them or interprets them, in this case really, interprets them and runs them on your computer in your browser, and that's when you get the page out. So that page that you see is really composed of these three different parts. And these three different parts are what your browser puts together into the thing you see. So it's actually not, it's not like when you're viewing a web page, you're looking at anything over here on the server. When you're viewing a web page, it's everything just in your browser. It's all been compiled and put together into that page. When you click a link on that page, it sends another request, and then the server determines, oh, they're going to go to another page. Let's go ahead and find out what HTML and the JavaScript and the CSS stuff they need, and let's go ahead and put it, send it back out, and then the browser over here is going to put it together again. So every time you do that, you're really just requesting a bunch of files from the server, and that server might be checking things in the database, like, for example, if you logged into the website, it's going to check if you are an actual user of the site, or if you typed in your password correctly. That server is going to get the information from the database. The database comes back to the server. It sends information back to the server, and the server will either send you a page saying that's an incorrect password, or send you part of a message saying this is an incorrect password. Or it's going to send you to a page saying you did something wrong. Or it's going to log you in and send you to your profile page. It's going to do lots of different things depending on that. So you can think of it here that all of the actions happening back here as far as collecting the stuff to give you, but it's really up to you over here in order to compile all of this information down into something that you can actually view. So if you're using Firefox, or if you're using Chrome, or you're using Safari, or any of these other tools, those browsers are all compiling these files into something that hopefully looks the same on all the browsers. Now, if the browser does something different, if they decide to render some CSS tags or some HTML tags in a different way, then the document will not look the same in that browser, but it might look the same in 2 other browsers. Okay? So I'm hoping that gives you a basic idea of how these things are put together. And what we're going to be doing in this tutorial series is we're going to be looking at Python, and we're going to be looking at a framework called Flask that will build our server here. And not in this series, but in a later one, we'll go ahead and we'll look at databases. But right now, we're only going to be worried about this, and we're going to end up serving an HTML page, and that's really about it. Okay, we'll get into the other stuff later on. So just Flask, server, HTML. And Flask here, if you go out to their page, you can see that there's the whole user guide, everything like that, if you want to learn way more than what I'm going to go over in this tutorial. So this is just a very, very beginner tutorial. We will talk about Jinja. We'll talk a little bit about routes and different things like that, just to get the very basic stuff in. All right? So I hope that starts us off okay. If you have any questions, just ask them in the comment section, and I'll try to get back. All right? Cool. Thank you.